Time is 10:01 a.m. It is January 26th, 2023. Happy New Year to everyone. I will now call the Board of Directors regular meeting for January 26th to order. First order of business will be the invocation. It will be led today by our alternative Pat Smith from Denton.
Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to come together in a new year, for all the success of 2022 for the Transportation Authority, for leadership, staff, for board members, for our communities, people that we serve. Help us to have wisdom and discernment as we meet today. Thank you for the efforts of those who prepared for the conversations, and just thank you for their efforts and help them to excel for your glory. Thank you for our board directors and their leadership, their willingness to serve. Help us to serve the community of us and your sons. Amen.
Now, you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. And now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Next, we have introductions. There is no introductions from the board. So I'll turn it over to our CEO, Paul Christina. Do you have any introductions this morning?
Yes, sir, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. I'm really pleased to be able to introduce to you two new members of our executive team and some other staff who have joined us here recently. First, I'll introduce Mr. Maurice Bell. Mr. Maurice Bell brings with him 30 years of transit operations experience in places like his service as Assistant Vice President of Bus Ops at Dallas Area Rapid Transit, as a Chief Operating Officer at the Transit Authority in Allegheny County, and has also done work as a consultant on initiatives related to transit like autonomous vehicles. He brings a great perspective on running a transit operation and making it better through technology, and we're really, really happy to have him. So thank you, Maurice.
Thank you.
Welcome. And next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Sherelle Evans-Jones. She brings with her a 20-year career in finance and various organizations, including the not-for-profit space, as the CFO of the Woodall Rogers Deck Park Foundation, and most recently was finance director in the City of Farmers Branch. And so we are really pleased to have Sherelle with us. Thank you, Sherelle.
Welcome again. Thank you both.
And then you want to do some other introductions as well? Okay.
Hello, sorry. County manager here at DCTA. Introduce some staff I'm very happy to finally have. First we have Violet Lee. She's our accountant too, and she's been with the county work for over 15 years. And then Drea Harrell, she just started Monday. She has over 5 years of experience in customer service and accounts table, and she's our
Wow. Welcome.
Thank you.
You guys been busy.
Yes, yes, sir, we have. Thank you.
Great. Now, the next item of business is our public comments. This agenda item provides an opportunity for the citizens to address the DCTA Board of Directors on any agenda items or other matters related to DCTA. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistling, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Citizens that are not able to participate in person must email his or her comments to kmorrisperkins@dcta.net no later than 3 p.m. on Wednesday, January 25th, 2023, to ensure the comments will be distributed to the board members prior to the meeting. Board of Directors is not permitted to take action on any subject raised by the speakers during public comments. However, the DCTA Board of Directors may have the item placed on a future agenda or action, refer the item to the DCTA administration for the study or action, briefly state existing DCTA policies, or provide a brief statement of factual information in response to the inquiry. Keisha, do we have any comments? Okay. Seeing there's no comments, we will now, public comments, we will now move on to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have 6 items. These are normally taken as one vote unless a particular director would like to remove one for further consideration. We have a motion to approve by Director Hayes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director McGuire. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Now we'll move on to our regular agenda. The first item is discuss and consider approval of task order number 10 with AECOM for electronic security technology planning assessment. Mr. Tria will be making the presentation.
Good morning, Board of Directors. My name is Javier Trella, AVP of Innovation and Information Technology here at DCTA. With a focus on safety, service, and ridership here at the agency, today I'm here to provide a update on the ministry that was approved as an expanded level project in FY23, the Security Access Control and Station Study. This is an action item, so staff recommends the board approve task order number 10 with AECOM, effective January 26, 2023, in the amount of $149,708.57. Slide. So this slide is a refresh of our expanded level project item that was presented during the budget process for FY23. The board approved $150,000 towards a security camera access control and station signage study. This study actually goes back to reviewing a quick refresh on what we're looking at here. Our facilities have minimal safety camera footage and coverage and decentralized access control. Our fleet has aging or non-functional security cameras throughout the fleet, and our passenger rail stations lack electronic signage such as next train signage. Next slide. The goal of this project and the scope that we have with AECOM is as follows. Existing condition survey and interviews. AECOM will come on site and interview DCTA stakeholders throughout the agency as well as our contractors, document our existing conditions, photograph our fleet, facilities, and provide information that will supply the study. Electronic security needs assessment is the second phase of the project. It'll define the electronic security guidelines and technology standards for use throughout the facilities, vehicles, and our assets. It defines the operational maintenance framework necessary to operate and maintain our electronic security systems. And that second part is important because what that also does is it educates staff and what this project will take as far as the burden on staff, the staff resources that we'll need to actually support the pretty big footprint this is going to add to our network. This will probably add 3 times as many devices on our network as we have today. So there will be additional information as far as what it will take to maintain and operate these systems. Next part of the scope is a technical basis criteria for design build RFP. Basically, a technical scope to be created based on the design guidelines and technical guidelines provided through the electronic security needs assessment. And finally, and probably the most important part of this assessment is the cost estimates and deployment timeline. Basically, what is this going to cost? For a long time, we've kind of sat on this project, gone back and forth over the last few years as far as what is this going to take to deploy, what's it going to cost, how long will it take? This will provide a rough order of magnitude of cost and provide a capital project plan moving forward, as well as the budget that it will take to implement this project. Included in that will be a capital project plan for deployment, maintenance, and continued operation moving forward. Next slide. So deliverables and timeline. The goal behind this project is to inform the FY24 budget process. So our goal is to actually have this completed by mid-May. So if approved, we will basically begin work on this immediately. The first month of it will be the existing conditions survey and photographing and documenting on site as we discussed. The second phase will be existing conditions report, where we'll come back with and let us know kind of where we're at, current state. And then finally, the last couple of months will be the needs assessment report, refining the rough drafts of the report, and then finalizing a report to give to us to educate the process moving forward. So, any questions thus far on this?
Board, is there any questions? This item? Is this an action item?
I move approval of the task order.
Approve. Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Item number 2, discuss and consider approval of fiscal year 2022 transportation reinvestment program trip annual report for fiscal year 2023 call for projects.
Good morning, I'm Tim Palermo. Agenda item 2, as you mentioned, is an action item to accept the annual report for fiscal year 22 and approve the issuing of the annual call for projects for fiscal year 23, in which over $19 million is now available to assist in the planning, design, and construction of transit support infrastructure throughout the community. Next slide, please. Next slide. The TRIP program was adopted by the board in November 2020, which sets aside 15% of the prior year's sales tax revenue for member city projects that support the long-range planning goals of DCTA. Next slide, please. This is the process. We're in our 3rd year of TRIP. The funding levels are identified at the end of the budget process when we have complete receipts from our sales tax. We're in step 2. This meeting is where we have the call for project for our member cities. 90 days are allowed to prepare applications, and then finally at staff review and board consideration in June. Upon approval, we enter into a reimbursement agreement for the member cities. TRIP is a reimbursement program, not a grant funding program, so expenses have to be documented and incurred. This is a little bit of the background, how these are calculated. And it's important to know that the unobligated funds roll over for a period of 3 years, and we're on our 3rd year. So we do have some funds from year 1, fiscal year 2021, that are rolling over into this year as well. Next slide, please. Program highlights. Last year, we had only the city of Denton submitted projects, and the other 2 member cities TRIP funding rolled over into this fiscal year. Denton had a lot of really good projects, all of them transit supportive, all of them improving walkability throughout the community. And we recognize that a walkable community is a transit friendly community. Next slide, please. This is the fiscal year 23 TRIP allocations, which again is the 15% of the fiscal year 22 sales tax revenues. $100,000 is set aside for administration. Next slide, please. This is how the rollover amounts in prior year authorizations or commitments were applied. The first year we had TRIP projects, fiscal year 21, from each member city for a total of over 2.2 million. Fiscal year 22, we had almost $4 million obligated to the city of Denton. The remaining amounts rolled over into the fiscal year 23 amounts, and that makes available over $6 million for the city of Denton, $1 million for Highland Village, and over $11 million for the city of Louisville. Next slide. Upon authorization today, we will issue the call for projects to public works directors, planning officials at each member city. And within that call of projects, I'm able to make myself available, all my contacts information, so I can assist with any ideas they might have or assist in preparing the applications. I have any questions? Next slide, please.
Any questions?
Thanks so much. So I'm looking at, it looks like slide 20 here. And I'm not clear on why the city of Denton didn't use their FY21 rollover last year. Is there some reason why, is there something about the way that the program is structured that you don't sort of use up the older money first before it expires? Do you understand what I'm asking? Yeah.
That's a good question. My understanding is in the resolution that passed it just gets rolled over into the balance. So
Okay,
it's not a prioritization.
okay.
So it goes,
But the,
balance is identified every year.
but funding can only roll over for 3 years,
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. So is there some mechanism by which, okay, so let's say City of Denton puts in request for, 6.5 million worth of projects. Is there any reason why, I guess if perhaps sales tax revenues are above projections, why they might not use all of their allocated funding and then lose that FY21 rollover? I guess that's what I'm asking is, I don't want the city of Denton to lose that rollover.
So if Denton entered into a reimbursement agreement for the full $6.4 million, and they've identified projects with construction and engineering estimates for that amount, that's been obligated.
Okay,
There's no forecasting involved of sales tax revenue because we use the prior year actual.
Okay.
I can interject here and say, I think it's probably as simple as those lines are broken out to see what rolled over. But when we actually award dollars, we could award the oldest first, and that would take the 21 off the table. So let us go back. I feel pretty confident that we can figure that out
Okay.
through the resolution. So
Okay.
I think he's showing an illustration, but your point is well taken. There's an expiration of the fund.
right.
We would want to spend the money that is going to expire first.
Okay,
Gotcha.
thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so if there's a way to address that administratively, then
Yes, ma'am, we
I'm
can.
satisfied with that, just as long as folks aren't, leaving money on the table. that they
Right, so
could use it.
so in other words, the request this year from Denton would have to be at least $906,000 in order for no dollars to be lost. Good, that's good.
Anybody else have a question? I'm gonna refer to- Yeah, motion to approve. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none? Carries. Thank you. Next is item number 3, discuss safety, service, and ridership metrics reporting. That will be our CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm providing this presentation in the context of the discussion that we have had collectively over the course of the last year or so about the accountability of DCTA to measurable outcomes. Overall, our outcomes are going to be identified by these measurable performances around safety, service, and ridership. But we also recognize our outcomes are measured by stories, the stories we tell about ourselves, the stories other people tell about us, and we'll have more conversation about that sort of thing in future board meetings. But for this one, just wanted to give you an overview of where we are today for these measurable KPIs. So next slide, please. So this is just a discussion item, and the objective of this briefing is threefold. Next slide. We want to talk to you about the types of reporting requirements that we have as an agency. We want to give you an expectation as to the form of regular reporting you should be seeing from us through this fiscal year. And then we want to give you some background as to how the mechanisms work inside the agency that allow us to deliver these KPIs and talk about how we need to improve those in the future to be even more robust on this front. Next slide, please. So here's a graphic of what I dressed up at the front that, last summer we talked about mission, vision, core values. We're very close to codifying those, and the agency's goals are around these KPIs we're going to talk about today, those other evidences of success, the storytelling that happens about us in the space, and what has been allowed to happen over the course of the last year because of the work that the board did last summer with staff is that we've been able to cause these goals to permeate all the way down through our staff so that everybody who works at DCTA understands how they deliver ultimately to the mission, and along the way, that's where the key performance indicators are delivered. So that's again, the framework that we're in. So next slide. So we have a number of different requirements for safety and service reporting that are dictated by the federal government. And I'll talk about them specific to the modes that we have. So under the Federal Railroad Administration, we have what's called a system safety program plan. And that is all about the safety related to the A train. And so on the rail side, we talk about rail equipment incidents. That's when a piece of rail equipment like a train has an incident. We talk about highway rail grade crossing accidents. We all are pretty familiar with those. We talk about things that happen when the train crews that operate in the yard don't follow the rules that are set for them by the FRA. We track those sorts of things. And then obviously whenever anybody is injured on the railroad, whether it's an employee or a passenger, we track those. And then like we've talked about on the Federal Transit Administration side, there's reportable and non-reportable. There is an FRA reportable and FRA non-reportable category of incident as well. So like you said, like you see here, lots of different things when we talk about KPIs and reporting. On the Federal Transit Administration side, so a separate federal agency, that's where our bus operation, and when we say motor bus, that includes fixed route and paratransit type services, and then our micro transit services. And we got pretty familiar and in depth with this last summer through the COA process on safety events and injuries, and the idea that they are FTA reportable or FTA non-reportable, depending on severity. Now, those are above the line, agency reportable sorts of things. And then for our own purposes, our collective bargaining agreement with the union talks about accidents that are preventable and non-preventable. So it could be preventable but not reportable. It could be non-preventable and not reportable. There's a whole matrix of things that can happen there. And the reason that's important is because when something happens, our operations staff has to determine, did the driver make a mistake? Did the driver not follow a rule? And that leads into a disciplinary process, again, which could report into, but doesn't have to report into, what we report to the FTA. And then on the go zone side, was the go zone driver at fault, or was the go zone driver not at fault? And this is where it hits particularly for us, because people see things happening on the road, but who among us has not been in a not at fault accident where someone else rear ends you or someone else makes an illegal turn? So in our quality assurance with our go zone contractor, we first have to determine who's at fault so that we can proceed with disciplinary and accountability action. And then that rolls up into the Federal Transit Administration. So all that to say, when we talk about safety reporting and KPIs, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Next slide. So here is the look at safety performance at DCTA through the first quarter of fiscal year 2023. And the vision is that safety is forefront in everybody's mind, service is forefront in everybody's mind, but these dashboards are on a rolling basis everywhere where DCTA has a footprint at a facility in our service area. So we're talking about, there's a rolling dashboard out in this lobby, there's a rolling dashboard at the DDTC, there's a rolling dashboard at the Old Town Louisville station when that facility gets put forward, because we want these things to be constantly in front of us. But this is for a first look, quarterly performance. And this is really the result of our leadership team being in the room together since August, saying, okay, how do we capture all this stuff and put it on a piece of paper so that our board of directors and the public can understand? And what you see is we're trying to compare what happened in fiscal year 22 to what's happening this year. And so this is the first quarter. So in fiscal 22 on Go Zone, there were 12 FTA incidents, and then we measure it in this incident frequency ratio as a mean per level. That's number of incidents per 100,000 miles. And then same thing on the bus operations side, fixed route paratransit reporting. Last year, there was one FTA incident, and the incident frequency ratio was 0.08. But then these are the below the line things, the non-FTA incidents that you see on both sides. So for this year, what we see is we had no go zone incidents in FTA incidents in October, 1 in November and 2 in December, and that's where the variability in the incident frequency ratio goes. So a couple of months with fewer incidents and the incident frequency ratio would trend downward. And our target KPI is 1. On the fixed route side, it's really easy. When you don't have any FTA reportable incidents, everything's flatline, and ultimately that's the vision for all of our services. On the rail side, we do a really great job. No grade crossing or rail equipment accidents last year, none this year, and we expect that performance to continue as well. Next slide, please. So wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we get to this point. This is a picture, a snapshot of what has to happen inside of DCTA in order to deliver the slide that we just looked at. The takeaway from this slide is that there's 3 distinct processes. All of them run on a manual basis from spreadsheet reporting with the people that are touching the service today. So on the bus side, NTMC feeds DCTA, who feeds the Federal Transit Administration. GoZone, the VIA Operations Center, we call it the VOC, feeds DCTA, that feeds FTA. And then on the A-Train side, our Rio Grande Pacific contractor feeds our rail operations team that goes to the FRA. Every time there's a handoff, every time there's a new report created, you have to go back through that whole process to make sure that what we're saying this month is the same as what we said last month, because there is not a central repository for where this data is stored, although it is secure. So next slide. So what we are considering, and part of our work plan this year for KPI reporting, is how do we create a mechanism and an infrastructure that allows for very robust on-demand reporting that enables the type of dashboard and transparency that we're all after. And what it looks like is, again, we're always going to have these 3 different modes, but ultimately we want all of these things to come into a chief operating officer. And that's part of Mo's charge, Mr. Bell's charge. That's why he's here, is to provide standardization and coordination amongst all those services. And then you see this thing that says DCTA data warehouse. This is envisioned as a central repository where that data is stored, so that any query that's needed, whether it be for federal reporting, our external reporting to our board, or the public, is available and not able to be confused because one report doesn't lend on another report. It lends back to the base data that's in the database. Any questions about that? Questions? Okay, next slide, please. So now we'll flip over to service. And look, we do this intentionally. Safety, service, ridership. As Mr. Bracy Goodwin's come on board, one of the things we're talking about is how do we create a culture here? The foremost amongst all of our components of culture has to be safety. And so when we talk about it, we're going to talk about safety, then service, then ridership. Because service begets ridership. If we don't have good service, we're not going to grow ridership. And so it's nothing by accident here, very, very intentional. So here's a look at our service performance in the first quarter of fiscal 23, October to December. We are very familiar with these sorts of metrics on the Go Zone side. What you see is seat unavailability by zone over the month. So seat unavailability on Go Zone ran 15–16% to as low as 8.5% through in December. And then in terms of wait times, we're doing very well relative to the number of ride requests that we're getting, more than 100,000 a month, that our wait times are in the 17.5 to 25-minute range. So the service has performed well in the first quarter. On the bus operations side, there's 2 components. One is our Connect service, and the other is our University of North Texas service. What you see there is our standard is 90%. That's a legacy standard that's been here for a while. We need to have conversations about if that's the right standard or if it needs to change. If we change it, we want to make it go up, not down. But what you see is that our bus services are not meeting on-time performance. That's been a part of the conversation that we've had with NTMC and the Hendrickson Transportation Group. And we are in the process of hiring a new general manager for NTMC. And as Mr. Bell has gotten on board, he's working through the NTMC organization to understand where are the places in that operation that we have to improve in order to meet our on-time performance, because we have an item coming up in the next discussion about the opportunity to create a bus network that's complementary to GoZone. That bus network would require very good on-time performance from our bus operations in order to meet that demand. So it's important that we're talking about this. And then in terms of our demand response service, that's our paratransit service, people who are asking for rides through that component of our fixed route. You see that we're tracking above the line there. And then from a rail operations perspective, those are the KPIs that are on our rail operations contract. Something unique about that is those KPIs may not actually reflect what the passenger sees, because the passenger may see a late train that actually isn't charged against the operator if it's something out of the operator's control, like weather or a lightning strike or something like that. And so the conversation we're having with Rio Grande Pacific is, how do we create a customer focused set of KPIs? We won't change the contractual KPIs, but we can create a customer focused set of KPIs that a customer can say, well, I know that the train was late more than that because I was stuck on the platform, at which time we would say, yes, that was lightning, that was other weather delays, that was unruly passenger, or something like that. So any questions on service performance reporting? Okay, next slide, please.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Google was not helpful in this. What does MDBF stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry, mean distance between failures. So our contract with the rail operator says that our vehicles need to run at least 57,000 miles in order to before having to go in for some sort of major maintenance item.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about, I missed that in the clear. All right, next slide. So again, let's talk about how we get to those outcomes. 3 different lines of service, 3 different mechanisms. I'll call your attention to here. The bus operation we've talked about before. The reason you all approved this Swiftly Transit platform is because today bus ridership is tallied manually and then turned into an Excel spreadsheet and a handoff between NTMC and DCTA. The direct hire of an NTMC general manager we expect will allow NTMC and DCTA to be more cohesive in the handoff and hopefully gain some efficiencies in that regard. The VOC data is a straight export, and then the Rio Grande Pacific folks operate their own dashboard as well. And today it goes into Mr. Palermo, who briefed you on the TRIP program, who then is the one who creates or provides the background for the public dashboard that you know about, the board reports you see every month, and any other data request that's generated, we turn to Mr. Palermo and he creates that report. Now, because we don't have this central repository, we are constantly trying to reconcile those manually with things that have been said historically about ridership and service and all those sorts of things, other Excel base files that are floating out in space, the manually generated reports that are requested sometimes. And then at the end of every year, we have to report into the National Transit Database, which ultimately takes on a separate independent process. The next slide. So the vision, again, in this work plan item around KPI reporting, is that our new chief operating officer is the central repository ensuring consistency and continuity. And we have, again, this data warehouse functionality for DCTA that allows all the data to go in, and then the queries that come out of it, it's the queries that are independent, not the data sources, to ensure consistency across all of our reports. Next slide, please. I'll pause there. Any questions on that? Questions before? Okay, so I wanted to give you a little bit of a recap on ridership from fiscal year 2022, and to say that we have a lot of momentum coming into fiscal year 2023. The highlights that I'll point out to you, what you have here is year over year total ridership for the agency. The green line is 22. You see it's above the yellow line, that was 21. So the entire agency ridership is up overall month to month, 21 to 22. Top 5 routes or top 5 services for DCTA is informative, I believe. The GoZone service is number 1, but DP and CP are 2 University of North Texas routes, one of which we'll talk about more specifically in a coming briefing. And then we have our van pool service that we talked about last year, about 200,000 rides or more last year, as well as our A train. The graph up on the right basically says we doubled our ridership from fiscal year 21 to 22. The A train was up 50%. The Connect service was down. University of North Texas is coming back. Go Zone didn't exist largely in fiscal year 21, except for half the month of September. But overall, ridership about doubled or more than doubled from 21 to 22. And what we've seen is that the train so far this year is up 16%, and every one of our other service also is up since last year. So a lot of good momentum coming into fiscal 2023. And I want to highlight this because we talked about it a little bit. When you look at our core services for our member cities, the train, Connect, and Go Zone, in 2019, those moved almost 878,000 people. Last year, they moved 905,000. And what that means is that on those services, DCTA has recovered its pre-pandemic ridership. That puts DCTA as a leader in the entire country, where most transit agencies are seeing 70% ridership recovery from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic. And so it's a kudos to this board of directors for vision on implementing a Go Zone service. It's a kudos to the DCTA staff who allowed and enabled the delivery of those services over the course of last fiscal year. And again, it gives us a great platform and foundation for moving into fiscal year 23. Any questions on that?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And this goes to the A train. I'm still curious, and I'm not sure if we've been able to pull that data, whether we're seeing A train ridership increase because of Go Zone drops or recoveries from those stations. So I'd be curious to see that if there's a pattern there.
Yeah. So last week or during this week, got our first look at Go Zone rides to and from A train stations. And I expect we'll have something to be able to share on that really soon. We are working on that. Any other questions? Okay. The slides that follow are the slides that are in your board packet, and so I won't belabor those. But again, hopefully this is helpful to you to understand when we talk about ridership reporting, when we talk about KPI reporting. This is what we're talking about. This is what you can expect from us moving forward from a safety. We're on the same page with regard to the ridership reports and how those are formed, and the safety and service reports. We're going to make that a standard for us moving forward this fiscal year. And then as we work in the background on how to create the data infrastructure to allow more robust reporting, that'll inform our approach in 24 and beyond. So that concludes my presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Another question.
This isn't a question, but I just want to thank you and the rest of staff for being so specific and so comprehensive, particularly on the safety metrics. I know that we've had a lot of conversations over the last year about, well, what about this and what about that, and what if we separate these metrics? And this reflects, I think, every single thing that anybody mentioned about the comprehensiveness of it. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 4, which is discuss intermediate service plan update. Mr. Treeland. Welcome back.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna kick this off before handing it over to Javier, who's going to run us through it. This is a continuation of the topic that we broached in October as we began to see data and correlation between Go Zone demand and some of our fixed routes that operate in Denton, and the board's direction to explore that further. And so that's the topic of this conversation. At the core of one of the board's questions is this idea. We are spending this year 10+ million on Go Zone services. We're spending this year 10+ million on bus services. Is that the right mix between those services, or should we think about something different? What Javier will lay out for you is the methodology that we propose to answer that question, along with how do we create this multimodal network that has been envisioned for such a long time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Javier.
I'll take off my technology hat and put on my mobility hat now. I divided this presentation into the what, the why, and the how of the intermediate service plan. So the goal is stated, DCTA staff will develop data-driven alternatives that attempt to balance GoZone coverage and fixed route service to increase ridership and improve efficiency, service, and cost outcomes. The next few slides that follow, I'll provide a brief recap of board policy decisions, then I'll dive into the methodology behind the integrated service plan. So this is not a new slide to y'all. I've presented this one probably a couple different times, and I am the lucky recipient of all the complicated slides at DCTA. I'll just provide a quick refresh as to what this is. Green indicates completed trips. The gray, violet green is the actual demand of the service. And then blue is our seat unavailability track. And orange is the number of hours that we put on the road each month. Few callouts that we've seen before, the contract amendment that we added in the summer of 22 for additional hours. The effects of that, how seat unavailability and wait times dropped. And then the beginning of the university semester where we saw seat unavailability rise again. And then we've refreshed this graph to actually show October through December and a few different things that have happened throughout the course. And we have a new fiscal year, so we have a few more additional hours that we've added to the system. Demand has stabilized over the course of the past several months. And then we've also added other items as well, such as the multimodal trip planning that launched. And we're basically watching what that does over the next several months, the effect of service. So we don't really have the fare change and service change data quite yet to see what it's doing to ridership. January numbers are coming in and they look positive. So we'll see what the effects of that looks like moving forward. So quick, these next few slides are just a brief reminder of board policy decisions that were made through the comprehensive operations analysis. The cost of a vehicle hour for a bus service is about $107, and the cost per revenue hour for a GoZone vehicle is about $51. Just a quick reminder that the cost differentiators between GoZone and a fixed route bus are the road supervisor function, personnel costs associated with training, benefits, and then of course vehicle depreciation. So I'll pause there for any questions on policy reminder. Next slide. So here we see routes 3, 6, and 7 that were retained based on board policy decision of approximately 5.1 rides per hour. Throughout this intermediate service plan process, we'll evaluate any fixed route service options or changes based on the guidance of this policy.
Javier, I want to interject here in response to a question earlier in a conversation I had, that this is a snapshot of the ridership productivity from the COA. This does not reflect recent activity. This is again illustrative to demonstrate what was at the forefront of the board's attention when you all made that decision. Yes.
Let me ask you then, this interesting question. So this is probably data that's 6 months old, 8 months old,
I think it ended spring.
close to a year. Okay, so it could have changed. Will at some point with the Swiftly platform, you be able to do this, get this data on a monthly basis?
We're about 6 months out for final implementation, of course, right?
That's the
Monthly, probably, yes. I mean, we'll have ridership reporting on a much more frequent basis than we do now.
right. So this was like tally data, hand tally.
Correct. Correct. Where Swiftly will provide automated passenger counting and provide immediate feedback. Basically, we'll always have to do a little back end refinement and verification of the data that comes out of it, but it'll be on a much faster basis. Next slide. Okay, so this slide is kind of a combined refresh view of what Paul shared with you back in October. These are the intra-route trips intra-route GoZone trips served by existing fixed routes. So what we're seeing here is about anywhere from 12 to 14% of trips that are on GoZone could be served by individual routes on the service. And on the right, what you'll see is our current GoZone service area in Denton, with our 5 routes from our network of interest in this conversation. And then surrounding it is the remainder of the city of Denton that is currently not served by GoZone. So what we're looking at here is basically GoZone covers about half the population of Denton, leaving a population pool of ridership, another half or another 60 to 70,000 individuals who could possibly ride GoZone. So it's an important part of the why of this conversation, because this GoZone capacity is being used and utilized kind of with this overlap situation. It could be taken out of that particular area. It could be shifted to other parts of Denton. It could be shifted to Louisville and Highland Village to improve the quality of service there, or it could just be a situation where it changes the cost structure of our operating service.
Javier,
Yes.
quick question. And it's to the previous slide. Are we still doing hand tally now, or what is the process for that? Are we doing it on a monthly basis? Is it a sample?
That process hasn't changed.
Great, thanks.
So on this slide is our current service plan and our network of interest, and this does reflect the changes that were made in January to our service. We're seeing here, as well as our current 3, 6, and 7, as well as the UNT branded Discovery Park and Colorado Express routes. You can see it's kind of a scattered mix of different start times, end times, frequency. We do see the additional frequency for route 6 and 7 of 20 minutes at peak, and then we see the operating hours of GO Zone. Again, the why of this is important because if we start to look at everything as a network, both our fixed route service and UNT as a network, that folks can ride and easily plan around. A goal of this project would be to see what it would look like if we started to align those timeframes, align the ridership to allow folks to transfer easily between different modes of service throughout the network. And on the right-hand side, that map just shows our current GO Zone service area with a kind of a cleaner view of the 5 different routes that are within the GO Zone service area as well. Any questions on
One
this?
thing I want to add to that is the reason that these 5 routes are the ones that are at the forefront. We mentioned this, is that obviously our 3 connect routes are there, but the 2 University of North Texas routes that are identified amongst all the UNT routes that we operate is that those represent the highest consumption of GO Zone capacity if you're taking a trip from one end of that route to the other. In other words, to run from the Colorado Express is the pink that goes down to the southeast. If you run a trip on GO Zone from the UNT campus to the far southeast side around Med Park, that's a higher trip capacity. That's a higher capacity consumer on GO Zone than is a trip in the urban core or within one of those outlying areas. And so it really, that is the reason for these 5 routes. If we talk about GO Zone capacity and how to best leverage it, the trips on this network generate the most opportunity for that.
Excellent.
I have a question. Just really quickly back to the slide before this one. Where we're looking at the percentage of trips that were taken on GO Zone within where the connect routes are, or the university routes. Does that are those routes, if a trip was taken on GO Zone when the other routes weren't running, would that count as part of that percentage or not?
These are, if the fixed route isn't, it's still, these are all the rides that are taken along that fixed route, whether the fixed route's operating or not.
Okay, so it's just by geography.
By geography, yeah. Origin, destination, make sure that you can take that ride on that single route from point A to point B. So you're right, these rides are all that, one's not just origin, but you can take the entire trip on a single route.
Trips within to be very precise, trips within a quarter mile of a stop on those routes. That's what's represented.
And that's an important question because it does follow up to the other point that I made about if we're going to make it a network that folks can use all the time, that would kind of remove that question. Like, well, does it operate at this time? Does it not operate at this time? It would allow us to move all those trips over if possible.
Thank you.
I think we'll get on that slide. Okay, again, busiest graphs, busiest maps I can possibly provide for you. So I'll speak to this in a little bit. So on the left is more zoomed in view. So this gray area that you see here with the routes all inside that particular area are where we have disabled the virtual bus stops for GO Zone. Again, the virtual bus stops are where folks can be picked up or dropped off for a ride. So the zoomed out, I'm sorry, and then the pink is a half-mile radius around that whitelist point disabled area.
Javier, when did you disable that? When was that disabled?
Just the amount of traffic within.
No, when?
Oh, when? That was disabled almost
Since the beginning?
almost from launch. I think within a few weeks of launch, we disabled all those virtual bus stops.
That's before the reason. Okay.
Correct. And then on the right, you just see kind of the same graph zoomed out with all the routes again. And then it's important to note that the black dots are where requests originate. So just because there's black dots in here doesn't mean that there's GoZone vehicles going inside to pick up folks. So you can request a ride anywhere. You just have to walk to the nearest location. So if you requested a ride in here, you'll have to walk to here to get picked up. Same thing with destination. You can ask to be dropped off, but you're not supposed to. Granted, we know that there's cases out there where those vehicles do come inside, and that's a human behavior driver issue where someone may just ask a driver, can you just get me a little bit closer? And we know that happens, but we know the percentage is low. So this is also important because what we're seeing here is in the 5 routes of the 5 routes in our network of interest that we're discussing, we were seeing that about 30% of trips could be served by a fixed route. And I know that earlier I said it was in the mid-teens, but that's for each individual route. If we look at this as a network, and which is why we're showing the entire map, you could, in theory, take, you could take one of the routes and switch another route and be served by that as a complete journey. So that's that 30% number comes from. And that's again in the origin destination pairs. And another call out from here is that we're not seeing this percentage of this number change during the holiday season, during the summer break. These numbers pretty much stay static throughout the course of the year. We've only called out the holiday numbers there, but we've gone back a full year and seen that the trend continues to follow. As I mentioned before, we did launch the multimodal app in November. Multimodal means you can either pick a ride on GoZone, or you can also be shown a fixed route proposal within the app itself. Again, this is where you can see a GoZone trip or a fixed route, and then the click through is where you'll actually see trip details. And the click through is important because 65% of GoZone ride proposals also receive a fixed route proposal. That's a pretty hefty number of proposals in that area. But what we're seeing is only a 3% click-through rate on the show route option. So what that means is only 3% of folks that get that ride proposal are actually trying to see, what that looks like. And it's really the only metric that we can see to see engagement. We don't know if someone who saw that took a bus or not. So, I mean, it could be a slightly skewed number because someone may see that route 2 showing up in 26 minutes and they may not even look at the click-through. So it's a tough number, but it's the one that we have to work with for now. And
Sorry.
but yeah.
I have not seen this on my app, so because I probably wouldn't.
Right.
When it shows the alternative, does it give a time?
Yes.
Okay, so they do have a time to, yeah, good.
Yeah,
good.
so it's probably a little small here, but this one here shows in 26 minutes you'd arrive, but your bus is going to arrive in 14 minutes.
Okay.
It uses our DTFS, our transit feed.
No, that's awesome. I mean, ideally, yeah, you would expect people to make the time conscious offering, but maybe they're more used to using one modality from, Uber and Lyft, and they don't want to make that behavioral change. That's interesting.
And to your point, we don't have too much data. We don't have very much data on this yet, but based on what we have from November, December, the fixed route proposals tend to be twice as long as the GoZone pickup ETA. So that definitely affects rider behavior, rider decision, which is the whole point of this conversation, which is saying, if we had a more frequent bus network, maybe someone would pick that over a GoZone. So.
And with the routes 6 and 7 that were increased frequency, we'll be able to see that over the course of the next few months and determine if that affects behavior. Great.
Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so the methodology behind this whole project. So develop a bus network concept. So what does a high frequency route within our network of interest look like? And the second step will be, what is the cost of both the fixed route service and what is the cost to operate GoZone service within that travel shed and the network that we're discussing today? The third would be consider on-demand rider conversion potential for fixed route. Mouthful. What that means is how many riders could we possibly move from GoZone from the GoZone service over to a fixed route? What's our conversion rate? Step 4 is our consider bus network productivity scenarios, rider per hour sensitivity analysis based on bus frequency. So what might our ridership look like if we increase frequency? And then step 5 would be evaluating the different alternatives and providing alternatives to the board, such as the cost of service trade-offs, the rider conversion potential, and what our network productivity could look like. And then step 6 is a soft target. There's a whole lot of data that we're still collecting. We've got a year of GO zone data. We're working through a lot of other data with fixed route. So it's a soft target of June to come back to the board for a decision based on the alternatives that we've been presenting. Next slide.
Here, if I could, I also want to say, I have been engaged with the University of North Texas. We had a conversation with them after we briefed this board in October. I visited them last fall to talk about this effort and this opportunity and what we're trying to accomplish. University of North Texas obviously is a very important partner for us because we provide their on-campus shuttle services. And so our anticipation is that we would be having a conversation with them over what this means for our services to them and all that sort of stuff as we're having this conversation with them all. And so I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that. Again, they have indicated their interest in understanding more about how these services work together. And so anticipate it'll be a really productive conversation.
And that concludes my presentation. Open to any questions anyone might have.
Questions?
Two. One is on the intermediate service plan. So the board can expect to see recommendations in June, is what I'm reading there.
Yes, but also we'll be providing updates throughout the process. So I think we have on our timeline about 2 updates to come back to the board.
Okay, because I saw something about the public seeing it maybe in March.
Correct. I think can you go forward 1 slide? Or I guess it's not in there anymore, the timeline
Yeah,
slide.
we want to do some sort of public engagement. We're not required to do a public engagement from a Title VI perspective since we're providing complimentary service and a number of other factors, but we would like to get some public engagement. We would like to get some engagement with our bus operators because they can help us inform things that we should be considering here. And then as these numbers come together and we have the ability to begin piecing the puzzle, we want to bring that before you. We don't anticipate it to be as robust a process as we were in last summer through the COA, where we were in depth for many hours every month, but we need to give you the touch points through this process so that you see the pieces as they come together.
The reason I'm asking about the timing is because what I would hate to have happen is that a bunch of information goes out to the public that we haven't necessarily seen. And I know you guys will cover that, but I just want to flag it.
Yeah, we will not have those discussions in a public forum without having been informed by this conversation.
And then my other question is actually for Director McGuire. Do you know if sales tax in Denton drops more than average in the summertime?
I do not know the answer to that.
You get what I'm getting at?
I get what you're getting at. I've only ever seen like just fiscal year numbers, just totals. I can try to find the answer for you.
I think it's an interesting data point to speak to universities not being a 9-month proposition in a city. That it speaks to these folks or a large percentage of them continue to stay year round. And I think that's going to be important in our conversations with UNT is that we are serving their constituency and ours year round. That might be another data point in our favor. Not sure exactly how to suss it out, but maybe city staff can help with that. And I think that the trick to that is many cities might have a lull in the summertime, but what's that average change, right? So if there's a greater than average change, then we know, yeah, everybody's leaving Denton, and you're absolutely right. UNT's argument of 9 months is a valid argument or conversation to have. If we don't see that greater than, then this year-round conversation makes, I think, even more fiscal sense. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
So Mr. Chairman, to be clear, we have alignment with this board on continuing through this process as laid out. Yes, very good. Thank you.
Next item is item number 5. Discuss marketing and communications review, January 1st, 2023 service and fare change rollout and next steps for new fare media transition. Brittany Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Brittany Farr, Senior Director of Engagement and Administration. I apologize for the lengthy title. The lawyer made me do it. Next slide, please. I'm here today to provide you a few different things. I'd like to provide you with an overview of the recent rollout of the January 1 service and fare change. Talk about what we did to enact that fare change, that service and fare change, how that service and fare change has gone so far, and then some next steps for us moving forward, because we're not quite done yet, but we have done a bunch of work and I'm eager to share that with you. Next slide. So just as a reminder, this is the decision that the board made back in the summer of 2022. A couple of different facets to that decision. One was the decision by this board to end the promotional pricing of GoZone, which had been in effect since the service launched on September 7th of 2021. We went ahead and decided to raise that base fare from 75 cents to $1.50, and keeping that base fare in the cities of Highland Village and Louisville, and then adding on that 50-cent per mile charge in the city of Denton for any trips longer than 4 miles. The second component of the decision you made was the service component. We approved item E as alternative E as presented to the board, which eliminated routes 2, 4, and 5, made some modifications to route 3 to be sure that we served our service providers at our daily bread, and then increased frequency on route 6 and 7 during the peak period. Again, starting to experiment with how frequent bus routes can maybe improve ridership in the long term. Next slide, please. Next slide. So that service change did go into effect on Sunday, January 1st of this year. It was a very arduous process, and enacting such a large service and fare change requires a lot of coordination from multiple departments across this agency. So some of the major aspects of the fare change were finalizing the new routes and schedules. So deciding when the bus, where the bus was going to go, when the bus was going to go, making sure that we had operators to cover those routes, and then training our new operators on what those routes look like. So kudos especially to Troy Rayleigh, Ashley Wood, and all of our friends at NTMC for making sure that we were fired up and ready to go on January 1st. One of the biggest components that I'll talk about in much greater detail throughout this presentation is notifying stakeholders and public about the upcoming changes. So when I first briefed this board on the process of the service and fare change, I think back in October, I had shared with you about the first thing that we were going to do was put up signage at the bus stops. We went ahead and put up our phase A decals, which were the red ones at the bottom, at all the stops that had been closed since about basically COVID. There was so much back and forth on bus stops staying open, bus stops staying closed, that we went ahead and posted those red signs at every one of our pre-existing bus stops that were already closed, notifying passengers that GoZone is available to them with a QR code that took them straight to the Google Play or Apple Store to download the app to be able to get a GoZone. But that was just the first component of it. We also put up the phase B signage at all of the stops that were going to close, notifying our passengers that this stop was going to close on January 1st and pushing them towards both GoZone and our service change page, which we put up on our website, which was the catch-all for all of our updates. Because we talk about the January 1 service and fare change, but we also pulled off 3 total service and fare or service changes over the course of December, and counting the modification, including the modifications to the UNT routes, the actual January 1 service and fare change, and then the return to campus, which took place on January 17th. And then the last part of that was phase C, which was the week that the service and fare change went into effect, having our contractor go out there and making sure that all of the stops that had a "this stop will close" sign now have "this stop is closed" sign. So really want to reinforce to the folks who ride the system what changes were coming to them. Another component of notifying stakeholders and the public is the advertising that we did. We had a really robust advertising program, which I'll get into in a little bit more detail, as well as the print messaging that we did, our public passenger information materials, and our community engagement, which is the focus of this presentation, so I won't spoil the lead there. We also had our IT department, Javier, his team, Kyler, Aaron, helping us with a lot of updates that needed to be made to multiple apps. So not only the GoZone app itself, but we have the transit app, which is how folks know how to utilize our bus network. And so that needed changes. And then a plethora of changes across the DCTA website, changing every 75 cents to $1.50, but also having to update our Shopify website, which is the way that folks buy fares online from DCTA. Because we did, pardon me, a complete media fare redesign as a part of this decision. And then with that, a new fare transition, which I'll get into in a little bit greater detail. Next slide for me, Erin. So the advertising and public information efforts is what I'm here primarily to cover today. I called it the Blitzkrieg. When I came back to this board in October, we talked about just starting our advertising efforts on the tail end of the State Fair of Texas and how those advertising efforts would continue to ramp up over the course of the winter months, kind of coming to a crescendo in December and then through the first part of January to remind folks that these changes were coming. Thanks so much to my amazing Director of Marketing Communications, Mr. David Magana, for scoring me this great picture of our service and change billboard. We did a whole bunch of different advertising. We did traditional print advertising through our partners at the Denton Record Chronicle, Cross Timbers Gazette, Star Local Media, all of our traditional media partners. But we also did the Cumulus geofencing web-based advertising, which I shared with you last time, which is if you're on a Cumulus platform, you're listening to the ticket or something like that. If you're in the areas where the service change was going to take effect, it would push out this service change advertising, so you really couldn't miss it. We did some radio advertising on the UNT radio station, which I know Mayor Hudspeth particularly enjoyed because he mentioned it by name at our briefing that we did. So kudos to Melinda on our team who recorded all of those, as well as some advertising at TWU. We talk a lot about UNT here, but TWU is a very large driver of ridership for us as well. So making sure their students and their faculty and staff knew what changes were coming, as well as the billboards. So we have the Convention of Visitor Bureau for Louisville billboards, which we utilize on a regular basis. But we also took out some extra billboards to make sure that our friends in Castle Hills knew what was going on. We had a really great placed billboard right in between Denton and Highland Village to make sure that everyone saw it. What I will say about our advertising efforts is based on everything that we did, we garnered 43 million impressions, which means that 43 million eyes saw what we did over the course of October to January. And when you take into consideration what we spent on advertising, we spent about 0.002, I'm actually told it's 0.0016, but I'm rounding up, cents per set of eyes that we saw on our material. So 43 million views at 0.002 cents per view is a really, I'm relatively new to the advertising game, but I'm told that those are really amazing numbers. So kudos to our team for executing that. Next slide, please. Public information is one of the most important things we do. Billboards are great, they're flashy, they make great pictures. But at the end of the day, we really want to make sure that our riders knew what was happening. And so our biggest source of truth is our DCTA website, dcta.net/service-updates was the catch-all for all of our information. We also did social media, both our own assets and paid assets. The kids love Twitter. We did hot item posters at all of our kiosks, posters at our rail stations. I mentioned the bus shelter signage. Signage on all of our vehicles. So we had signage on the buses, on the trains. Our friends at VIA put up our nice service change signs on all of the Go Zone vehicles, as well as have materials to hand out to folks, letting them know about the fare change that was going to occur. And then traditional press releases, digital communications. So push notifications through the Go Zone app were really helpful because that gets you to the specific target. Utility bill inserts, both in the city of Highland Village and the city of Louisville. And then I just put up some examples of things that you can see there. We did, in accordance with our Title VI policy, produce all of our materials in both Spanish and Hakachin, which are the two designated languages for the region. For those of you who aren't aware, the city of Louisville has a very big population of refugees from Myanmar, and they speak Hakachin. And so that's where the Hakachin comes in. As well as changes to the Shopify portal so folks can see the new fare media when they're buying the tickets. Next slide, please. And then community outreach too. Some of the materials that are at your place today were distributed across the service area, particularly to hotspots where we have high ridership. So Mary Worthington on our team did a bunch of outreach to all of these different organizations, providing them with information, providing them with materials. And then we also did presentations to some of our local focus groups, so our community advisory quarterly meeting where Mr. Christina gave a great overview of what was happening with the service and fare change, as well as our 2 social service agency roundtables. Those folks generate a lot of ridership, and they're particularly affected by the new fare media redesign. So wanted to be sure that we touch point with all of our different high ridership organizations and then our social service agency organizations, so they knew what to expect coming into January 1. Next slide, please. So redesigning fair media, it's kind of like an onion. You make a decision and you start pulling back layers. And when we made the decision here in July of last year, the board decided that we were going to eliminate Go Zone passes, but for a special population of people. Next slide, please. So what the board decided last year is that we're going to eliminate Go Zone passes unless a person qualifies for a reduced fare eligible pass. They purchase that pass through the nonprofit pass program that Mary Worthington runs, or they purchase that pass through our employee program. And so because of that, we took a look at all of our existing fare media and we thought to ourselves, okay, if we're going to get rid of Go Zone eligible fares for majority of the population, or Gen Pop in this case, but we're still going to need to have a certain subset of our population be able to ride, let's just completely redesign our fare media and make it as easy for the rider, key message number 2, that we possibly can. And so what we did, we didn't think we could get any more clear than designing fares that very clearly say valid on Go Zone or not valid on Go Zone. And this allowed us to take all of these different fares that have different looks and don't really have a consistency with them, and really streamline it into a consistent approach that is with our brand that we can move into perpetuity. Next slide. So you have them at your place, but this is what the new fare media looks like. We had a graphic designer, Robbie Stengel, who actually attended the University of North Texas and rode the UNT shuttles, but has no transit background, help us in designing this. And there's a method to our madness. We as transit professionals get a little ingrained in transit world. And so we can see something and be like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense to us. Boarding and lightings. It's really nice to have a non-transit perspective on designing these types of things. So our instructions to Robbie were, pretend you're coming to Denton for the first time. You've never stepped foot in Denton, Texas in your entire life. How would you design a fare that made it easy for folks to understand how to use the system? And Robbie just did an absolute bang up job. And I was, when I first saw these, I think I actually might have cried. You guys know I'm a crier. They were just so beautiful. And I just was really pleased with how they came out. So a couple of changes that we made besides the overall design. Paratransit customers will ride for free with their paratransit badge. They ride all of our services for free, and Go Zone is no different. We've also developed a new children under 5 badge for children to ride Go Zone. Children under 5 ride free on the Connect and on the A-Train service. And so in cities like Louisville and Highland Village, where they don't have bus service, they should be able to ride Go Zone for free too. But because Go Zone is based on a per seat, they need to be able to account for that seat when booking the trip. So now you can either apply online or come to the downtown Denton Transit Center and get a children under 5 badge. We're just going to print the child's birth date on there that they turn 5, so it'll be valid through their 5th birthday. No pictures, because some folks are a little hesitant to put their child's pictures on things, and I completely understand that. And also a child that looks a certain way at 1 could look completely different at 4. So we have the new children under 5 badge. No university passes, including the UNT IDs, are going to be valid on Go Zone moving forward. Now, that's not to say we may not have students who have valid on Go Zone. Maybe they have a disability, maybe they're qualified in one of the reduced passes, but you're going to need to buy a separate fare if you're a university student to ride Go Zone moving forward. We combined the AM, PM, and day pass. We did have a separate AM, PM, and then a separate day pass. And so what if we just put a block that's a day on it too, and took away a whole slew of tickets out of the system right there? And the same thing with the reduced passes. So we had separate passes that said local day pass, local reduced passes. We still have reduced passes, but that's a point of sale issue. When you purchase the pass, it's on us to figure out what your appropriate fare is. The bus operator doesn't care how much you paid for your ticket. They just care that you have a ticket. So by eliminating reduced fare passes, we were able to eliminate almost 50% of some of the tickets already in circulation. And then as we move forward with whatever the evolution of the intermediate service plan is, whatever decisions we make about fare policy moving forward, if we were to alter our stance on Go Zone availability on passes, that would eliminate another 50% of all of the tickets that we have in circulation. As I mentioned, all eligible fares are clearly marked with Go Zone label. You will not see an eligible pass that is valid on Go Zone that does not have this Go Zone sign and this green associated with it, just trying to make it very clean, very concise. The ticket actually tells you every service that it's valid on. So here, this is a local reduced Go Zone, so it's valid on A Train, Connect, and Go Zone. Here's a regional pass, which is valid on Dart, Trinity, Metro, TRE, A Train, Connect, and Go Zone. If it's not valid on Go Zone, it says not valid on Go Zone. I didn't know how to make it any cleaner than that. So trying to make it as easy as we can for the riders. Next slide, please. So with the change of fare media, there's again, like an onion, you peel it back and you find other things that you have to do. And if we're going to redesign all of our fare media, that means that we're going to need to find a way to get folks who have existing media, the newly designed media. Next slide. The overhaul of the passes that we needed to do resulted in a lot of changes. We had to not only change the physical hard copy tickets that you have in front of you. I'm so grateful to have Javier who took care of all of the TVMs. So the tickets that you buy at the rail stations will now say valid on Go Zone or not valid on Go Zone. They're not as pretty as the ones Robbie designed, but they get to the point. We had to modify the Go Zone app. We had to modify the DCTA website, the online pass portals. We want all of the new passes up so people know what they're buying, when they buy them. We needed to notify our customers and stakeholders that this was changing. We needed to notify our operators and customer service that this was changing. So Javier and I did 10 different independent training sessions with both our driver partners from VIA, as well as our NTMC bus operators and customer service agents, notifying them of the changes, and then putting together this amazing fare media guide. Again, kudos to David for helping me with this, which you have at your place, which all of our operators will get, all of our customer service agents will get, and we'll have for the public to be able to see so they know what passes work where and how that works. We needed expanded printer capabilities. Some of the new badges have a lot of design elements to them, and the printers that we were using to print them were very old. We needed to talk about existing badge transitions, and then we needed to think about a transition period. We have over 2,000 ADA certified customers on our paratransit service. How do we make sure that they are getting the right badges in a timely manner? So what we instructed our operators and the public is, through the month of January, we are not going to hardly enforce the new badges or the new passes. If you qualify for reduced fare, if you're a social service agency that bought 100 passes in December and you haven't used them all by the end of the month, we're not going to make you come back and exchange them all. Those passes are going to be valid through the end of the month. So we give our operators some time to transition. We give the public some time to transition. And as we continue to unpack these layers with badge transitions, we might think about what that actual hard deadline looks like, just based on staff capabilities and the amount of badges that we actually have to transition. So these are primarily the 3 different kinds of badges that we need to transition. The ADA certified one is going to be the most important because that's actually a form of payment. It's a form of fare. The reduced fare eligible badge just lets us know that you are able to purchase a Go Zone eligible badge. And so even the ones that already exist, getting those interchanged is not the end of the world. The one on the end is going to be our new badges, right? So staff badges, board badges, your dependent badges. We have to certify those with a new sticker in March anyway. So part of the method behind my madness of having you all take pictures is that we'll just send you out new badges in March when we replace the sticker on it for you and for you and your dependents. And yeah, I hope you look nice today, sir. So that'll be part of the transition in March. Again, our first priority is making sure that our ADA certified customers have their new badges, because some of our ADA customers do like to take Go Zone. That's what we've heard from our NTMC folks who are dealing with them on a daily basis. And so we want to make sure that if our ADA certified customers want to take Go Zone, they have a pass that very clearly tells both the driver that they can take Go Zone. Next slide, please. Oh, I didn't believe I wrote those new words on this. So as I mentioned, ADA paratransit have the highest need. There are over 2,000 ADA certified customers. So we're going to take all hands on deck approach to being able to transfer this amount of badges in a way that's going to make it easy for the rider. So I'll be reaching out to each one of our member cities to set up a day or a couple of days in your city where we will just hold an open house clinic. We'll bring one of our fancy new printers with us, invite our Access ADA customers to come to that facility and have new badges made on the spot, if that's what works for them. We'll also have a mail-in option, so you can mail in a new photo and a forwarding mailing address. And if you're on our ADA certified list, then we'll produce a new badge and mail that out to you. We'll direct customers that they can go to the DDTC at their own convenience and have a new badge made if that's how they choose to do. And then after we go through this whole approach, we'll take a look at some of our highest areas for ADA paratransit badges. So day facilities, dialysis centers, wherever we have high concentrations of people, just go out there and take their picture and get their forwarding address and send them new badges, just to make sure that we get everyone what they need to have that new green Go Zone label. And so David and I will be working on a mailer that will go out, direct mail to our paratransit customers as well as beyond the vehicles, letting them know about dates, times, and all of these different mechanisms as we nail down the details. So lastly, just some key takeaways. No major service and fare change is flawless. I've been through quite a few of these in my tenure, both here and at DART. But overall, I think that this has gone relatively well. We've had a couple of things that we had to learn on the fly. So for instance, we learned the day of that how you mark that you have a Go Zone eligible fare has moved. You no longer pick it as your form of payment. It has moved over to concessions and you toggle that concession on. And that's what tells the Go Zone operator that they don't have to charge you, that you have a valid fare. And so we learned that, and we very quickly communicated all of that out to our social service agencies, as they're the ones that are primarily purchasing these, as well as push it out on social media. We have a couple of new web pages on the website that specifically talk to this, or how you qualify for a Go Zone eligible pass. We're going to continue to work on the fare transition. That was one of those layers that we weren't expecting as much, but we've got a plan and we're going to stick to it. We learned the value in face-to-face training and informational sessions, both in the trainings that we did for our Go Zone driver partners, but also for our NTMC operators and customer service representatives. It was a really great opportunity to not only share with them the method behind the madness, what the changes were, why those changes occurred, but we learned a lot about what they face in their day-to-day operation and some of the obstacles and joys of their work. And so that was a really great way to build consensus and start to knit back together. I mean, we have DCTA, we have NTMC, we have VIA, we have Rio Grande Pacific, but at the end of the day, we're all one big DCTA family. And so this was a really great way of starting to knit us back together and build that relationship. There's value in widespread multi-outlet communications and advertising. The shotgun blitzkrieg approach works. 43 million impressions. So that was a really awesome thing to hear. And at the end of the day, if you do everything with making it easy for the rider in your mind, I think that leads to success in doing these kind of large wholesale changes, because with the rider in mind, in everything that we did, we were able to have a relatively successful rollout with minimal issues. Next slide. So that's really all I have for this update. Next month, I'll have Mr. Magana up here and he will do a presentation about our marketing communications plan, our social media plan, all of his vision now that he's been here for a few months and knows where the restrooms are. He'll be up here and give you his vision for the marketing communications department. But it has been my pleasure to be able to come up and present these kinds of updates to the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
You haven't been working very much lately. Huh? This is wow. A lot of work. And anybody have any comments?
Thank you for those good efforts.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And it's a team effort, and not one department at DCTA did not contribute to this success.
Kudos to everybody, lots of fingerprints on that from everybody, so really thank y'all.
Thank you, sir.
That's great. Congratulations.
So I do have a quick question about the rollout. But first, I want to say, great work. This is a heavy lift, and it's going, not without hiccups, but it is going, and it's moving in the right direction. That's for sure. So I was texting you from my training for the point in time count. I was volunteering through United Way of Denton County. I think that the umbrella organization for the pit count is Denton County Homeless Coalition, I believe is the name of the org. And first of all, they're super, super grateful. Everybody is for all of the passes that were provided for that event. I was at Our Daily Bread this morning, trying to get takers for the survey, right? And, you know, if you've ever tried to like go in cold with people experiencing homelessness and just ask them a bunch of questions about their name and birthday, usually not super thrilled about that. But we're curious about what I had in the bag, and I told them what was in the bag. And when I said there's a transit pass, boom, they said, yes, I will take your survey. I would like a transit pass. That's something that really makes a difference for people that is meeting people's needs. So excellent job to staff on that. So some of the social service providers that were at the training and then the count shared that they have been having operators turning people away with old passes. So if we just want to make sure that we're reminding everybody that we're still accepting the old passes through January 31st, yes. And now what should a social service agency do if they still have old passes left over after January 31st? Can they come in and swap them out
That's a great
for a
question.
new one?
Absolutely, yes. So, and that's true right now. If you have already purchased your pass through Mary, you can come to the DDTC and we'll change out those passes. With regard to your comment about operators not taking old passes, it's kind of a two-pronged approach, right? The first part is making sure that we have that concession toggled on. It's my understanding that if that concession is toggled on, then the Go Zone driver partner will see the charge on their screen as zero. And so they will know not to collect fares. If you select cash and don't toggle that on, and then you try to get in the vehicle, it's going to deduct that cash from the VIA operator. And so they're going to be a little hesitant about letting you on that vehicle. So it's a public education campaign on our part on letting folks know where it's moved, how to toggle that concession on. And then the other side of that is, to your point, continually reminding our friends at VIA and Go Zone that badges are acceptable. Our words to both Go Zone and NTMC bus operations is, for the month of January, let's err on the side of letting people ride while everyone adjusts to the new system. And then with regard to if folks are still having issues with Go Zone operators not taking passes, I would ask them to contact me and do as much detail as you possibly can. If you can let me know the date and the time, that will allow us to pinpoint that operator and make sure that they have very specific reminders of what they are and are not supposed to accept on Go Zone services.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to also say thank you to Brittany and the entire team who put this together. As you can see, it's a very significant lift, and also thank you to the board. You all gave us that time between July and January 1 to do all this work, and I can tell you that we used every minute of it. So thank you very much for that. It helped to make this more manageable for us and a better product for the public. So thank you all.
Thank you again. Okay, now we'll move on to item number 6, discuss local and regional transportation update legislative issues. So I guess I will go first. December 8, 2022 RTC meeting. Let's see, walking through some of those. It looks like we were transportation alternative set aside, that was approved, includes the share use pass or trails. There was discussed lapse of grace period. This was finally addressed, but it seemed like it was really dire. We were gonna lose FHWA contracts if COG didn't get this approved. Looks like it finally got approved, and I'll report on the following RTC meeting where that came through. Those were major items for the RTC meeting on December. Then DRMC meeting, January 6, 2023. Let's see, our speakers talked about the upcoming session. Expect, as what happened was the speaker was sworn in. Expect Dave Felix, which he turned out to be the speaker-elect for the state legislature. Anticipated property tax relief bills, some transportation advocate bills. They talked a little bit about bills related to electric vehicles and additional charges for them. They anticipated that it will be a slow process, no real outstanding issues except for passing the budget, at least at that time. Reported. RTC meeting January 12, 2023. They did get that the approval of conformity, and Michael Morris reported having a meeting with the governor of Tennessee on dynamic price lanes. They're very interested in doing that. Let's see what else. Oh, Medal of Honor Museum. They're requesting $1.895 million for the infrastructure around the site. And that was all approved. We're going to send a letter to the museum, signed by the RTC, all the primary RTC members. Discussed the issue with temporary paper tags on vehicles. That's something that there's 2 bills out to address that, HB 718 and HB 914. And discuss air quality conformity. We went through that whole discussion about the concerns Michael Morris had about the way that the air quality is measured in our region, and his anecdotal points about during the pandemic didn't see a noticeable drop, which was unusual, he said. So he's questioning some of the way those things are being measured. And those are the items I have on my side. I tried to reach out to our secretary, Diane Costas. I will be out of the office for the February DRMC meeting. So I asked her if she could take my place. If she can't, call Christina, can you make sure either you or some of the staff is there? That's all I have on my end. Paul, do you have anything on your end on local regional issues?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't.
Anybody else? Okay, that concludes the regular agenda. Informational reports. We have the monthly financial reports on pages 84 through 87. Monthly ridership numbers on pages 88 through 96 of your packet, and the local agreements for the purchasing cooperatives on page 97. After that, we move on to future agenda items and board member requests. Do we have any board member requests at this time? Seeing none, our next regular meeting is February 23rd, 2023. Following item is report on items of community interest. Do we have any reports on items?
Mr. Chairman, this would be a good time to bring up, just looking at the calendar ahead for the month of March. We have obviously our board of directors meeting scheduled for March the 23rd. Earlier in that week is the day that DCTA will go down to Austin, and we understand there's a number of other Denton County events that are happening that week on the same week as the board meeting. And so as long as that's on you all's radar, then we can proceed with all those plans and move forward.
Any concerns from the board of directors? Okay. All right. Next, I'll ask our attorney, do we have any executive session items?
No executive session items this agenda.
Okay, no executive session items. Any other business for the good organization that someone wants to bring up?
A quick note, National Bike Month is coming up in May. And I know my city staff is beginning to reach out to do the mayor's bike ride again. So if staff could keep an eye on that. I have a feeling that conversation's already happening in the background.
It was a good event last year, and we definitely want to be on the forefront of planning for this year.
Oh, yeah. Then Louisville, get my tacos. 16 miles for tacos.
Well, seeing as there are no other items, that will conclude today's meeting. We will be adjourned at 11:37 a.m.